That day, something changed profoundly within her. It was no longer just a house, no longer just a property to sell, a plot to occupy, a real estate opportunity, or a whim of a mother-in-law. It was the tangible proof of a love erased, stolen, smothered for 20 years. And no one would touch it. No one. That very afternoon, Nina went to see the local notary. The woman examined the papers, looked up, and asked if she wanted to register the property in her name only. Nina replied, yes. The notary asked if her husband was aware. Nina calmly replied that it was none of his business. This inheritance came from her grandfather, and the law was on her side. She picked up the pen, signed, and in that simple act, there was nothing left but administrative formalities. There was a sense of reparation, a reclaiming of power, a silent promise made to the little girl she once was, but the story didn't end there. A week later, on a Saturday, Andrei's car stopped in front of the house in Lipovka. Raisa was the first to get out, loaded with bags, already ready to settle in, as if she were finally arriving at the property she had claimed for herself in her mind for days. She walked up to the gate and knocked. The door opened, but it wasn't Nina. It was a woman in her 40s, wearing a simple bathrobe, her face surprised. "What can I do for you?" she asked. Raisa replied in her most confident tone, "We're here to move in." The woman smiled politely. "Oh no, that's not possible. We're renting this house for 3 years with a contract." Raisa's face fell. "What do you mean you're renting it? This is my son's house." And then Nina's voice rose behind her, calm, steady, implacable. "No, this is my grandfather's house." Raisa turned around, her face twisted with shock and rage. "What have you done?" Nina was getting out of a taxi. She approached without raising her voice. She simply explained that she had decided this house should be useful, should be lived in, should shelter a real family, should bring in income rather than remain empty just to satisfy someone else's comfort or whims. Raisa almost screamed that she had already planned everything. The bathtub, the stove, the garden. Nina replied with a disarming calm. "Then make plans for your own apartment." At that moment, Andrei burst out of the car beside himself. He shouted that he had made it clear his mother was supposed to live here, that she had no right to do this. Nina looked at him without fear. "You ordered me to, yes. But you never asked me." He then tried his last argument, the one he always thought was decisive. "And Dima, did you think about him?" Nina replied, "He was the first one I thought of." Silence fell. Andrei realized he had lost something he thought he would always have, his power over her. He asked bitterly if she really thought he would stay with her after this. Nina answered softly, "No, I think you're going to leave," and he left. He got back into the car, slammed the door, and disappeared with a screech of tires. Raisa, meanwhile, stayed there crying by the gate, repeating that she was old, that she needed some air. Nina simply replied that she had an apartment and a son to take care of her. Then she got back into the taxi without looking back. That evening, at home, Dima asked her a question that made her heart ache. "Mom, did Grandpa know that you loved him?" Nina gently ran her hand through her son's hair. "No, my darling, I don't think so. But now I know that he loved me." Dima smiled and went back to his drawings. The months went by. 6 months later, Nina and her son were living in a small, more modest 2-room apartment near the school. The furniture was old, the comfort basic, but the atmosphere had completely changed. There was peace, light, no more shouting, no more suffocating tension, no more cold wars at the table. Dima seemed calmer. He smiled more often. On the walls, the superheroes had disappeared. In their place, he now hung his own drawings. Trees, a river, a little crooked gate, a simple house lost in the countryside. One day, without looking up from his paper, he asked, "Mom, will we ever go back there?" Nina replied that she didn't know, but that the people living there now were happy. Then he asked for news about his grandmother and his father. Nina sighed softly. She had heard from acquaintances that things were going badly between them, that they argued constantly. She was not surprised. When you build your life on possession, there isn't much left when you can no longer possess. One evening, Dima came up to her with a new drawing in his hands. "This is for you," he said. Nina looked at the paper and felt her throat tighten. On it was the house in Lipovka. In front of the gate, a little girl was holding hands with an old man with gray hair. Both of them were smiling. Nina thanked her son in a trembling voice and told him she would hang the drawing above her bed. Then Dima asked her with that disarming seriousness children sometimes have, "Mom, don't you ever feel lonely?" She smiled. "No, I have you." He thought for a moment before asking, "And what if one day you get married again?" Nina burst out in a soft yet sad little laugh. "Then it will only be with someone who will never consider my house as his own." Dima looked up. "Are there really people like that?" Nina replied, "Yes, but they are rare." A week later, she received a letter from the tenants. Inside the envelope was the rent payment and a small handwritten note. The woman thanked her for the house. She said that the children were happy there, that they spent their days outside, that they laughed in the garden, and that flowers had even grown near the porch. Nina reread this sentence several times. Flowers had grown. Where others wanted to impose, to take, to invade, life itself had chosen to bloom. And at last, Nina smiled, a calm, deep, and free smile. For the first time in years, she no longer felt as if something was being taken from her. On the contrary, she had reclaimed what had been stolen from her since childhood, her memory, her dignity, her voice, and the right to say no. Because deep down, this story is not just about an inheritance. It's the story of a woman everyone thought was docile until the day she realized that staying silent meant disappearing. It's the story of a stepmother convinced that everything was owed to her, of a husband who believed that love gave him rights over everything, of a child who watched adults make decisions in his place. And above all, it's the story of a single word. A word that Nina had never truly dared to say, a word so short and yet powerful enough to change an entire life. No.